You're doing everything right. You're taking your medication, watching what you eat, staying consistent, and yet the scale barely moves. If that sounds familiar, you are not alone, and more importantly, you are not broken. New science is finally explaining why roughly 1 in 10 people who take Ozempic or semaglutide simply don't respond the way most people do, and the answer has nothing to do with willpower or discipline. Today we're breaking down the real biology behind Ozempic non-response. We'll cover what's actually happening in your body, what the latest research says, and what you can actually do if you're in that 10%. Stick with me, because this might completely change how you think about weight loss medications. Let's start with a quick refresher on how Ozempic is supposed to work, because understanding the mechanism is key to understanding why it fails for some people. Ozempic belongs to a class of drugs called GLP-1 receptor agonists. GLP-1 stands for glucagon-like peptide 1, which sounds complicated, but here's the simple version. Normally, when you eat, your gut releases this hormone called GLP-1. It travels to your brain and basically says, hey, we're full, slow down. It also slows how quickly food leaves your stomach, keeps your blood sugar stable, and reduces cravings. Ozempic is a synthetic version of that signal. It mimics GLP-1 and essentially keeps your brain in that full, satisfied state for much longer. For most people, this leads to significant reductions in appetite, calorie intake, and ultimately body weight. Clinical trials showed average weight loss of around 15% of body weight. That's massive. But here's the thing, those are averages. And averages hide a huge amount of individual variation. So what's going wrong for the 10% who don't respond? Researchers are now pointing to something called GLP-1 receptor variability, and this is where it gets genuinely fascinating. Just like some people are born with variations in their eye color genes or their metabolism genes, some people have genetic variations in the gene that codes for the GLP-1 receptor itself. That's the lock that Ozempic's key is trying to open. If your lock is shaped slightly differently, the key doesn't turn as well. A 2023 study published in the journal Cell Metabolism identified specific genetic variants that significantly blunted the drug's effect on appetite and weight. People with these variants had fully functional GLP-1 receptors, but the receptors were less sensitive to activation, meaning Ozempic was binding to them, but the signal wasn't getting through as strongly. Think of it like trying to have a phone call with bad signal. The connection is there, but the message keeps breaking up. Now here's a surprising fact that a lot of people in the health space are not talking about yet. It's not just about your genes. Your gut microbiome, the trillions of bacteria living in your digestive system, appears to play a significant role in how well GLP-1 receptor agonists work. A 2024 study from researchers at the Karolinska Institute found that people with lower diversity in their gut bacteria had a significantly weaker response to semaglutide. The working theory is that certain gut bacteria actually help amplify the body's natural GLP-1 signaling pathways. If those bacteria are missing or imbalanced, the medication has less of a biological foundation to build on. So your gut microbiome might literally be determining whether your prescription is working or not. Wild, right? Let's talk about a third factor that gets almost zero attention, and that's baseline insulin resistance severity. Now don't let that phrase scare you. Insulin resistance just means your cells have become less responsive to insulin, the hormone that manages blood sugar. It's extremely common, especially in people who have carried extra weight for many years. Here's the counterintuitive part. You might assume that people with severe insulin resistance would respond better to Ozempic since the drug helps with blood sugar regulation. But research is showing the opposite trend. When insulin resistance is extremely advanced, it can interfere with the downstream signaling that GLP-1 activation is supposed to trigger. It's like trying to send an important email when your entire internet infrastructure is overwhelmed. The message gets sent, but it never fully arrives. Some researchers believe this is why people who start Ozempic very early in their metabolic health journey tend to see better results than those who have been dealing with obesity and metabolic dysfunction for decades. So what can you actually do if you're a non-responder or a partial responder? Because this is where we go from interesting science to real actionable information. First, talk to your doctor about alternative GLP-1 medications. Ozempic uses semaglutide, but there are other drugs in the same class, like tirzepatide, which is the active ingredient in Mounjaro and Zepbound. Tirzepatide actually hits two receptors, GLP-1 and GIP, and clinical trials show it produces even greater weight loss than semaglutide for many patients, including some who had a weaker response to semaglutide alone. Having a different shaped key for a slightly different lock might be exactly what your biology needs. Second, seriously invest in your gut health. I know that sounds like generic wellness advice, but there's hard data behind it here. Increasing dietary fiber, eating fermented foods like yogurt, kefir, kimchi, and sauerkraut, and reducing ultra-processed foods can meaningfully shift your gut microbiome composition within weeks. If your microbiome diversity is part of why Ozempic isn't working optimally, improving it while on the medication could amplify your results. Some researchers are even looking at whether probiotic supplementation alongside GLP-1 therapy could be a legitimate clinical strategy in the near future. Third, address insulin resistance head-on through lifestyle. This doesn't mean the medication isn't doing its job, it means you're giving it backup support. Resistance training, lifting weights or using resistance bands, is one of the most powerful tools for improving insulin sensitivity. Even 2 to 3 sessions per week makes a measurable difference. Pair that with reducing refined carbohydrates and added sugars, and you're essentially clearing the communication lines so the drug signal can get through more effectively. Fourth, get your genetics tested. This is still a somewhat emerging area, but companies like Genomind and even some traditional healthcare providers are beginning to offer pharmacogenomic testing. That's just a fancy way of saying they analyze your genes to predict how you'll respond to specific medications. As this field matures, it could become standard practice to run a quick genetic panel before prescribing GLP-1 medications, so patients can be matched to the right drug from the start instead of spending months discovering their non-responders. Here's the big myth we need to bust before we wrap up. If Ozempic isn't working well for you, it does not mean the problem is your motivation or your lifestyle choices. Non-response is a biological phenomenon, and the science is increasingly clear on that. Too many patients are quietly blaming themselves when the real answer lies in their receptor genetics, their microbiome, or their metabolic history. Knowing this should be empowering, not discouraging, because biological obstacles are things medicine and science can actually work around. The bottom line is this. Ozempic is a genuinely remarkable medication that has helped millions of people. But it is not a one-size-fits-all solution, and the emerging research on non-response is leading us toward a future of truly personalized metabolic medicine, where your treatment plan is matched to your unique biology instead of an average from a clinical trial. That future is coming faster than you think. If this video helped you understand something you've been struggling to make sense of, hit that like button. It genuinely helps this channel reach more people who need this information. Subscribe if you want weekly deep dives on health topics that actually matter. And drop a comment below. I want to know, are you currently on a GLP-1 medication, and what has your experience been? Your story might help someone else. And if you're curious about what else might be stalling your weight loss results, check out our video on metabolic adaptation, it's linked right here. I'll see you in the next one.